Our next question comes from JT, who asks, what is the subjunctive mood? And is the subjunctive similar to conditionals? So, JT, thank you for this wonderful question. Even to be wondering about something that can be as intimidating as the subjunctive shows a questing mind, and a mind that's willing to question and willing to explore the language of grammar. Because one of the most intimidating things about grammar is that it has some terms which may be very unfamiliar, like subjunctive. What in the world is subjunctive? But like any term, or more generally, like any tool, when we come to know how to use it, it can help us to see things or do things we couldn't do before. And in this case, it can help us to understand language more fully. So the first thing to say about the subjunctive, or more specifically, the subjunctive mood in English, is that the subjunctive is on the wane. We do not use the subjunctive in English nearly as much as we did, say, 200 or 300 years ago. So the first thing is that you don't need to get too worried about the subjunctive. Beyond the realm of grammar classes, for instance, you're unlikely to find somebody who's going to stop you in the street and grab you by the collar and say, hey man, do you know what a subjunctive is? Although that would be an interesting situation. Maybe you could write a play about such a thing. But it is something that is interesting to us as writers and as speakers, because the subjunctive allows us to say things with greater precision, and because there is greater precision, greater power. So let me start with an example, because I think that's the easiest way to see what the subjunctive actually is. There's a wonderful song from the Broadway musical, which was later made into a movie, Fiddler on the Roof. And the song goes, if I were a rich man. And the whole song is about this this wish, or this imagination, this fantasy of what life would be like if the lead character were a wealthy man. And the song has some wonderful lines. For instance, he sings about, if I were a rich man, I'd have one great staircase just going up, and another even longer coming down, and one more going nowhere, just for show, which I think are just marvelous lyrics if you want to explore the writing of lyrics. But what I want you to see is this. This character is talking about a fantasy, something that is not true in fact, but is only being imagined. He says, if I were a rich man, rather than if I was a rich man. Let's take a look. Let me pull up our screen again. If I were a rich man. Here, the were is in the subjunctive. Because if we were to make a statement in the past, such as, I was a rich man, or I was happy to study English, why not? Let's see if I can get that aligned a little bit nicer. There we go. In both of these cases, we have what's called the indicative mood, which is just basically our normal or usual way of speaking about things as they are, as we experience them in life. So I was a rich man. I was happy to study English. But that's why this subjunctive is so interesting, because it allows me to say, I'm not a rich man. But if I were a rich man, maybe it would be like this. Maybe it would be like that. In other words, the subjunctive allows us to take a flight of fancy. Now, one of the other things that you asked about, JT, was the conditional. And in fact, the subjunctive and the conditional do go together. The conditional, in this case, is indicated by the if. If I were a rich man. That also signals to us that the sentence is about not the world as it is, but how we might imagine it would be. So oftentimes, the subjunctive is used with a conditional. If I were a rich man, what things might, how things might play out. Now let me compare that or contrast that sentence with one last sentence. I wish I were a rich man. Here too, we have the subjunctive. Here it's following a statement of wish. I wish I were a rich man. The use of the were telegraphs to a reader or a listener, even if they don't even know the term subjunctive, they know that we're now into the realm of wishes, into the realm of how we hope things might be. So, but in this case, we're not using a conditional. And so, although conditionals are often paired with subjunctives, it is also possible for subjunctives to be on their own. Now, the usual way to teach about something like the subjunctive would then be to go on and give you a formal definition of the different kinds of subjunctives, and then I might give you a whole heap of different examples about all the different ways that the subjunctive is used. However, this tends just to confuse students by placing a whole bunch of new ideas in their heads. So here's what I'm going to suggest to you instead. Focus just on this particular kind of example, if I were a rich man, and see if you can find in your own direct experience, whether you're reading or listening to people around you talking or watching a movie or something like that, see if you can notice other uses that sound similar to you, other places where a verb might be being used to suggest not how things are, but how they might be in fantasy, or how you wish they could be in fantasy. That will start to show you in your own direct experience how the subjunctive continues to be useful in describing our inner world and our desires about the outer world. Then, once you've had a chance to familiarize yourself with that particular form of the subjunctive, write to me again, and I will answer, or I will continue this exploration by sharing a second use of the subjunctive that is also, that remains common. But more on that soon. This is, I hope, enough to get you started, JT. Let me know if you have any questions. And I hope that gives you a good entry point into the world, which is in some ways quite fascinating, of subjunctives.